Hi, welcome to Live By. My name is Danielle. Welcome to the podcast. Today we have an exciting episode. We have Dan Levin, our Levintus president, on, and I'm excited because we're going to talk about AI. I know there's a ton of information about AI every single day, every newsletter, every social post, and it's drinking from a fire hose. And I'm trying to absorb as much as I can. What Dan has been doing for me and the rest of the Levintus team is taking all that information, distilling it down, and translating it for us to its most salient points. So I don't know, he's been doing that for 5, 6 months. It's been really informative and critical and really a time saver. So I think this will be a really interesting podcast as we can pick his brain. He has, as most of us, but I think even more so diving into all the AI news and trying to translate and understand. And so let's open that brain up and see what's in there and get some of the stuff you've been reading and learning. I mean, I'm excited for it. So thanks for joining us today.
It's quite an intro. I don't know what that's going to look like when you open up this brain.
Okay, let's dive in. I want to talk about adoption. You have been implementing enterprise technology solutions for over 20 years. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in that time. What's different about this AI wave compared to previous tech adoption cycles that you've seen?
I think this wave is different because of speed, accessibility, and adaptability. The value shift isn't just about replacing processes; it's about transforming how people and systems kind of work together, right? So, like in past cycles, take the internet boom or mobile or even cloud in the early days, you had time to plan, you had time to adopt and integrate. Even though it seemed like it was moving fast, it did move over a longer period of time. This AI wave is moving exponentially faster. We're seeing major leaps in months, not years, and it really compresses the adoption timelines, increases the hype, the fear tactics. I mean, it's just, a crazy cycle, I think, that we're experiencing. And the competitive gap, between the early adopters and the people who are more late to adopt can widen very quickly, almost instantly, it would seem. And all these AI models, one is created 2 weeks later, one's created and it's the greatest thing. It's beat all the benchmarks. And then all of a sudden, a week later, one surpasses it. So it's moving incredibly fast. So, I'd also say, with previous waves, I think that the bottleneck was probably different. Bottlenecks previously were maybe in infrastructure or budget, which those still exist, no doubt. Now, I think it's just the ability for people to adapt their processes and their governance and their learning. So the tech can do the work, but your team, has to adapt to the workflows and the compliance and the culture fast enough to leverage it properly and responsibly.
I think the pace of change is just beyond a lot of people's ability to, whenever new technology comes out, you have to understand it, kind of get a sense of what it's doing, and then figure out how you can apply it to your business. Those take a minute. And to your point about one thing comes out one week and then next week it's something new. And now do I have to learn that new thing, or is the thing I learned this week going to be sufficient? So it's a lot coming at people. And you don't want to be wasting money. You want to be affecting your business. So it is, I was describing it to someone, it's like being in the washing machine, I bet, for some people, just so much going on.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah, right. So you had, we'll talk about approach now. You mentioned some companies are approaching AI backwards. What do you mean by that?
What I probably meant, I remember when I said it, certainly my opinion. I just think, kind of going off of what you were saying, you were kind of talking about hype a second ago, word, but it's very easy to get caught up in a shiny tool instead
Mhm.
of a real problem, right? So the companies that start with the shiny tool instead of the real problem creates a science project. If you start with the problem, you're creating an ROI. So, don't chase the trend, chase the problem. And it's very easy to get caught up in the hype because in the clickbait and the fear headlines are crazy. It's like, and it's happening so fast and it's in front of you every single day. At least for me, I don't know what other people are searching and what they see, but navigating that, it's very easy to just go down rabbit holes and get caught in hype cycles and chase the shiny new object instead of business problem. So that's probably what I meant by that. I have to remember when I said it or the context, but yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's we'll get the question sometimes, how should I be using AI, right? And the real question is maybe the better question. It's okay to ask that, but you really don't want to just implement something that doesn't have an ROI. So maybe the next question should be, what are manual processes? Where's friction with my customers? Stuff like that. And what's fun, even though it's so much change and so much, I guess, volatility, you can kind of just blue sky it and say, I bet something can do this for me. Versus in the past, you may have been more limited. Now, that's not exactly true, but kind of, we used to say King of France type of approach. Like I can get anything I want and then start there with your total blue sky optimism. What do I need for my business? And see if AI can deliver it.
Right. And it's no different than addressing any other problem, by the way. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
forget about AI, just pick any technology or any shiny new object. Don't chase that, right? You got to reground yourself and figure out how are you going to use it to your benefit? What problems are you going to try to solve and go from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're the king of France, the
Unless you're the King of
analogy.
France. As I mentioned in your intro, you're definitely someone I think more so than most people I know, just trying to keep up with the latest AI tools. Everyone's, I'm sure, to some degree, but to me, you're, on the leading edge of it. As I said, use you and appreciate you for helping me stay up to speed. And your communication to the team is invaluable. So, giving that kind of context, what AI tools do you use personally every day? And what AI trend you think is overrated? Like you said, there's some hype in there. Not all of this news and all of these headlines are going to turn out to anything meaningful. So you have to distill between the noise and the kind of reality. So anyway, tell me what tools you use every day. I'm actually
Yeah.
very curious
So,
about this.
well, I'm flattered. So thank you. Again, I think of practical ways of integrating it into my workflow and not chase a shiny new hype object. And for me, navigating that clickbait is also a real thing, right? I have to, uh, you know, I got to go through the same hype
Mhm.
cycles that everyone else is seeing. And when you see GPT-5 just released and it's going to change everything everywhere all at once, and you're behind if you're not using these 10 things and yada, yada, yada,
Yeah.
just be grounded enough to read through that BS for a second and think practically. And that's what I try to do. And so tools that I use are, I think I use AI in every part of my life. I'm not using it probably nearly as much as a lot of other people. So it's a spectrum, but I use it in a lot of things. And so Chat GPT and Grok, just off the bat are probably my main co-pilot in brainstorming and drafting and problem solving. Chat GPT knows me definitely better than I know myself. And it is I use it very Socratically and I'm constantly challenging it. You got to read through the BS. I mean, these things are designed to love you. These things are designed to compliment you. These things are designed to, kiss your butt. And you gotta, at first, when those came out a couple of years ago, they're definitely confidence boosters. And you're like, whoa, see, I'm thinking the way I should be thinking. And then you have to be grounded enough to say, wait a second, why does it always compliment me and everything I'm doing, and fight back and use it to bounce ideas, but continue prompting it in ways where you're playing devil's advocate, where you're calling it out with things. And just like you would maybe in any other kind of conversation, don't take its first response. So I use that a lot in brainstorming. I'm constantly using other tools like Gemini and Claude and Perplexity and a lot of these GPTs as well, because they all offer different strengths. And they're also getting surpassed by one another every couple of weeks. So just in someone that is in the AI space, I have to set aside time to just understand as much as I can and play with them. We use AI coding assistants like GitHub Copilot and Cursor and many other tools that will accelerate our development work. For data, there's a ton of AI features being introduced in Power BI, and we're developing our own in our SparkFlow product that can surface data insights faster and really turn data into a proactive versus reactive tool. Other tool, Fireflies is a great meeting summarization tool that I use daily, and it's kind of like a lifesaver. Learning workflow automation tools, I've talked to you about N8N, Power Automate, obviously. These are things that aren't so, they're not secret. They're just very powerful everyday tools that a lot of people should be using. Let's see what else, I probably am using others. There's probably more complicated things. We're building our own MCP servers, and we're building our own, models, and for some of our products that we're developing. But those, I'm not personally using those every day because they're not ready 100% yet. But yeah, I mean, those are the ones I listed are probably great everyday tools that a lot of people can get.
Mhm.
You asked me about the trend.
I asked you about,
You asked that overrated trend question.
yes, I did. Trend that's overrated. Yep, that's the next one.
AI generated everything is not a winning strategy, right? Or everything could be done in seconds. I don't know if it's an overrated trend, maybe a misunderstanding. Just because AI can crank out a bunch of content or code or images doesn't mean it should necessarily. Quality and security and alignment with business goals is still, number one. So security holes are very, very real. AI tech debt is very real. Flooding your systems and just the world, your zone, whatever you want to call it, with mediocre AI output is going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. Having an unlimited amount of employees doing an unlimited amount of work without proper instruction and direction and training is going to do more harm than good, right? So AI is really no different. You have to use it in a structured manner. So, I'd say that's probably an overrated trend. That that's my favorite Jurassic Park quote. Now I'm forgetting what it is exactly, but just you know, people get so consumed with whether or not they can, whether or not they could, doesn't necessarily mean they should. So, and probably a very common misunderstanding, which is along the lines, is just that AI can just magically do everything all at once, right? So magically just recreate a system for me. And, a lot of the times, especially with legacy systems, it can do certain things and it can definitely speed up the development quite a bit, but it's not going to get you 100% of what you want overnight. It's, you need direction, you need business rules, you need logic. It's AI can't do that. This is still just generative output based on statistically what it thinks is the next part in the pattern, right? So it's getting very good and it's getting some self-correctiveness. It's not these tools can't think for themselves. So they're improving memory, which can give it more, you know, more space to think back in its context, but it's still generating output based on statistics. So it's not thinking for itself. It can't create your business rules for you. It's gonna, even though hallucinations are down in GPT-5, they're still gonna exist. Um, so it's it's an efficiency multiplier, but it's not a replacement. And so really understanding that difference is huge. And there's, AGI is the next, that the next model, general intelligence. That's kind of the next huge leap, right? That's when AI can produce things that it's not trained on, right? So today you've got the narrow intelligence, which means that AI can only produce based on statistics on what it's trained on, right? But what does it think the next word in the pattern is? You still got to have the governance in place. You still have to have the understanding that AI is not going to get you from 0 to 100%. You still need all the things you needed before. You can just get there faster, right? You still need people. You still need governance. You still need requirement building. You still need security layers. You still need an iterative approach to get to where you want to be. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's so instead of just one tool being overrated, I like how you put it, how it's not like, so what I was thinking, I've watched videos, you've sent me videos of, hey, you can get this going up in 3 minutes. You can build this workflow in 3 minutes. And they do it, and the video is not inaccurate. But if you want to apply it to your business, it may take longer than 3 minutes because you've got to, troubleshoot a few other nuances. My point in that, saying that, is what the news headlines are not exactly inaccurate, and those demos you see are not exactly inaccurate. But if you expect to apply that to your business and have effect, you may not have this. It may take a few more steps for you. And you may need a few additional tools. You may need some additional learning. So you watch the ChatGPT-5 release video and they're doing all this cool stuff and it takes minutes. Doesn't always mean it's going to take you minutes. It will eventually save you time. But to apply it specifically for your business, you may have to, like you said, iterate a few times, be patient and play with it, type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we're in the middle of this boom, this technology boom, if you will. And we really don't know what tomorrow will bring. But what we do know is that there's a lot of technology coming, right? And so again, if you just think about the fact that AI is only good on what it's trained on, right? So these huge amounts of data that AI is being trained on. So AI can produce code quickly, sure. It could produce books. It could produce a lot of things based on what it's trained on, but it can't create things that it doesn't know about. And we're about to enter a world of new technology that AI doesn't even know about. It's still going to take time to adapt and create all this new technology now that, these new types of, whether they're ways AI can integrate into systems or different interfaces and agents that are yet to exist, you're going to have to create all that. So, the time it's taken to create your interfaces, you can only focus on that new technology if your interfaces are getting spun up quickly and some other code is getting spun up quickly. So the So things that are taking a long time today, or yesterday, I should say, things that used to take a long time are now sped up. But things that are now going to take a long time are the things that have yet to exist, that we have to now spend our time and our thought and shift our mindset and our mental energy to creating these new things that we didn't have time to do before. Hopefully that's kind of making a little bit of sense. Maybe you can articulate that better.
I think you nailed it. I think it's just a little bit of seeing the forest for the trees sometimes when it's coming at us this fast. Gain a little perspective helps. We mentioned a couple times in so far ChatGPT 5. We've talked about ChatGPT. So the 5 release just came out last week, was it? Um,
Maybe.
Something like that, maybe 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I don't know. It's measuring these things in hours now. So, again, using you as I've, appreciated you for the past couple months of like getting all this information, distilling it down. So for our listeners, what does this release mean for the latest advance and mean for business? Should they kind of take advantage now or kind of what's coming on the horizon? What's the next big thing? So I guess maybe characterize ChatGPT for us a little bit, how you think businesses can leverage it, and I think this question's actually asking you to look into the future, but just, what do you think about adopting now versus waiting?
Well, I don't think you should wait. I think that, I think there's a saying, perfection is the enemy to progress or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So don't wait for perfect AI. Today's AI is definitely imperfect, but it's already outpacing a lot of, things we were doing yesterday. GPT-5 is just the next major step forward. But waiting is a bigger risk. The advantage comes from starting now and evolving as the tech evolves. So GPT-5 is smarter, but it's not just smarter. It's more accurate. It's better at reasoning. It can work on, like I was mentioning before, it's got a larger context window, so it can remember and process a lot more information at once, and that makes it better at enterprise level tasks and analyzing a lot more data at once, analyzing thousands of documents, orchestrating multi-step workflows, and understanding larger code bases and integrating with systems that act as it can act as a better co-pilot, rather than just a chat assistant. So I think you should not wait for the next big thing, because it's already a pretty big thing. And the capabilities are just compounding, So today's GPT-5, which came out a week ago, they're already talking about, there's so much hype on now Google's next release. And I'm sure Grok is following in Meta. I mean, the amount of money that Zuckerberg is throwing at AI is just absolutely insane. So, if you wait, you'll have to build under a lot more competitive pressure, right? So if you start now, build the infrastructure, the culture, the muscle memory, you'll be in a much better place. And there's so many systems that you have to upgrade and you have to enhance to take advantage of some of this AI. So that's a good place to start too, even before you can even really work and integrate with some of the AI. So I think the successful businesses will be the ones that just adapt quickly and have, you know, proper feedback loops to iterate through improvements, right? And keep going. And that's probably true in anything. And it's no different with AI adoption, other than the timelines are significantly increased, right? You implement anything, build a good feedback loop, adjust and iterate, and continue to improve. It's true in anything you're doing, right? Whether it's learn how to play soccer, guitar, or adapting AI.
Yeah. I think that's a good point on a good way to help people understand why they shouldn't wait. That part of it, even if some of, I'll get some of what they do and learn may be outdated or there may be something better coming along. The advantage is still getting you and your organization accustomed to leveraging these AI tools, accustomed to finding ways to build them in the organization that adds value. And it can be building blocks. It doesn't mean you start with something and it gets wiped out because the next big thing comes on top of it and replaces it. It could be foundational and you're adding these tools. To your point about having an infrastructure there that can leverage these tools. And so starting now is important versus waiting for the big magical thing that's going to happen, which it's kind of the big magical things happening every day. And then the new one comes. So I think it's a good point about the muscle memory you mentioned and the exercise of getting used to leveraging new tools and building them and using them in your everyday. I think that's, a case to be made to not wait. Kind of talking about not waiting, wanted to talk about kind of how companies get started. And I think what I hear, I'm sure you hear it, there's executives, business runners, fear of missing out on opportunities combined with or, kind of juxtaposed against the risks of AI, maybe unchecked AI adoption or making mistakes. So we work with companies in highly regulated industries, healthcare, financial services have a lot of regulations. How do you help them navigate the wanting to take advantage of these tools, but not fall out of compliance, not have security issues, that type of thing?
I think it's about moving ahead smartly with guardrails. I think the fear is valid because unchecked AI and will introduce compliance risks. It'll introduce data exposure that creates reputational damage and all the bad things, right? So in regulated spaces like finance and healthcare and insurance and whatever, that fear is even more magnified. That doesn't mean ignore it and let your competitors figure it out first. It just means move forward and progress as best you can. Just do it with governance and guardrails, because your competitors are going to be doing it, and other people are going to be doing it. So just figure out how to do it wisely.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
I have found it interesting in talking to friends at unnamed enterprise level companies and how little AI they're able to leverage. And so I think people are struggling to find the balance of leveraging these tools, accelerating the workforce, productivity and maintaining security and compliance and control. So I think it's still a pretty good struggle because I was pretty surprised how limited and all these names would be ones you would really recognize and they can hardly use it. I think it's people are still trying to navigate their way through this. So continuing on talking about getting started. So when we get this question, so when a client says, we want to implement AI, but don't know where to start, how do you handle that question?
Same way I've been saying, I think the best technology projects are no different than AI projects. They don't start with a question of how do I implement this technology or what can AI do? They start with what problem am I trying to solve for? Right. So if you start with the business value, not the technology value, and work backwards, you'll get the right AI approach. Are you trying to reduce costs? Are you trying to grow revenue? Are you trying to speed up decision making? Uh, Improve customer experience? But get the business goal, and then the tech solution will kind of uncover itself, and the AI solution will uncover itself. But without that clear business goal, you're gonna. What did I think I said? You're gonna go. It becomes a science project, which are important too, just in terms of research and development. I mean, it all kind of got to start somewhere, but I'm sure the invention of AI itself wasn't just, hey, what can I do? let me do a science project. It probably came from an idea. I'm speaking completely out of context. I have no idea, but I'm sure it came from how do we automate certain things, or how can we, they're probably trying to solve a problem. Um, that usually leads into a successful implementation.
Yeah, I think we're seeing companies with very interesting. I think we're getting this question less and less. We still get it, but I like how we're getting people have ideas now and they're very distinct and specific. So just talked to somebody yesterday, big tile company. They their salespeople have to deal with like 10,000 different types of tile. And they'll be in front of a client, and he was trying to leverage AI to say, hey, I'm looking for modern farmhouse in teal with this type of look. And the really good salespeople can get to it in 5, 6 minutes. And the newer ones could take them an hour to go through. Can you leverage AI to look at images and interpret things like that? So really specific and distinct. And we're seeing lots of cases like that. They aren't the Mark Zuckerberg level investments, but I don't think these companies want to do that. They want to start somewhere, find a place where AI can improve and reduce friction and improve efficiency. And we're seeing a lot of those really distinct cases or ideas or projects. And I think that's a really good place for mid-sized companies to start. They don't have to think pie in the sky. Just start asking your team, like, what makes you crazy because you're having to do it manually.
Yeah,
It can be that simple.
I think it should be that simple. I mean,
Mhm.
it's with anything. If you start too big, you're taking on too much. You're probably going to fail. So start
Yeah.
small,
Yeah.
get through incremental changes, celebrate the small victories, and then you can grow and grow and grow. But don't take on a tremendously huge problem I mean, there's definitely success stories of doing that, but I think it's more manageable when you take something that is a more manageable size, and you get comfortable with solving that problem, and then boom, win, go to the next one, and you're going to continue to learn and continue to find better use cases.
Right. Right. Um, um, all right. So getting into kind of the practical use of things, and we face this question a lot because of all the tools out there. So it's a build versus buy question. Are we building everything from scratch or leveraging existing platforms? So, what should a company consider building? When should a company consider building the LLM, GPTs, and MCPs or agents instead of or in addition to the ready made tools? So, you get some of those questions of the project, and when should they leverage tools and when should they build them from scratch?
I think we're still talking about AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I know this is a general question too that we always talk about, but
Uh,
yeah, in terms of AI tools. Yeah.
well, I think the companies that nail down data quality and access, integration, existing workflows, we almost never really build from scratch anymore.
True.
You know, if we're if we're building, we're typically taking something and integrating. And um, with GPT-5, and so if we talk about, like, are we creating our own AI for a second? The models like GPT-5 and Claude and everything, they give us real world capability instantly. So we can fine tune those, wrap them into domain specific agents, and connect them to internal systems through MCPs, and APIs. So that gets you real fast time to market, and you're leveraging real AI. And so when you talk about build versus buy, in anything, it's no different, right? Take something that exists and leverage it, and you're going to have a faster go to market. When you do custom, again, talking about AI and custom AI, and whether you should build custom LLMs or agents, there's definitely going to be use cases, regulation and privacy, those kind of demands might dictate if you have to build your own highly specialized language or formats that, aren't handled well in general models. I mean, there's a lot of that too. So, or it's your own IP, right? Proprietary workflows that require unique reasoning, similar to what we are building with our deal lens. And there's also cost efficiency at scale. So AI isn't cheap. And the more that you use these models, the more expensive it's going to be. So at a certain time, you might say, especially if you're using it at very high volumes, it might make sense to go private and take it to a cheaper model to run privately.
Yeah, and again, this doesn't mean you don't use AI to build these tools, right? So that's, is AI the tool you end up using, or you have to build a custom tool, but you can build it using AI. So compared to 5 years ago, building that tool for yourself can be a lot faster and a lot cheaper because you can still use the AI to build your LLM, build your whatever you're looking at. I've run across a couple people lately. I just talked to somebody this week who now he's a development firm like ours, and they were unhappy with the meeting note taker and the amount of you mentioned fireflies, and they just had a specific use case, so they built one for themselves, and it's doing a lot more than meeting note taker. So instead of just leveraging fireflies, they took that idea and built one for themselves because they had additional wanted to look at documents. I can't remember the specific use case, but it was pretty interesting in that for them it made sense. And they did use AI tools to build that, but they didn't end up using an off the shelf meeting note taker. So there can be these reasons, and it can be interesting depending on what you're looking for. You just mentioned deal length, so let's talk about that before we close out. You're building or have built, we're almost done, AI tool specifically for equipment finance leasing. Why do you think this is the right use case, and what makes this